Hello, I'm Father Jon Roberts. This is an introductory video to a series on the biblical stories as painted by the most prolific, the most amazing artist the world has ever seen. His name is Rembrandt Harmenszoon van Rijn. We just call him Rembrandt. Rembrandt has a life that can be best characterized by the words of Shakespeare, who said, "The good work men do lives after them." This is ever so true of this artist. I'm going to show you some of his work, not all of his work. The one thing that we have learned is that Rembrandt was one who was a master of light, and he created several pieces. So many, in fact, that we've had to have some research done on just how many there are in the world today. So after the 1960s, a project was initiated to gather up where are all of his paintings and his works, his renderings, his etchings. And would you believe it that after that was done, they discovered nearly 300 oil paintings. There were another 300 prints and etchings on wood and metal, and his sketch pads alone totaled over 2,500 different renderings that he would have done. Such a massive amount of work. And with all that done within his time, you would think that he would have been the most popular and wealthy artist the world has ever seen. But it was actually the opposite. He died very poor. He was well known, but very poor. I think it's important that I share a little bit with you about his life. He didn't live beyond the age of 63. That's the first thing I should tell you. And this next slide that I'm going to show you is a picture of him in a self-portrait. And here you can see him. He's got a few more wrinkles to his face, and he's seen a lot of life at this time. From these two snapshots between the age of 22 and let's say 53 in this picture, he has lost his wife Saskia to tuberculosis. He lost 2 children with her before birth. They died in the womb. He lost a 1-month-old child, Cornelia, and he has an estranged son named Titus, who later becomes a monk. He did self-portraits of himself, some over 20, 25, and would you believe it, on the news that I heard just a few days ago, another one of his self-portraits came up, and on the market it drew in $55 million. I don't know if Rembrandt would have ever imagined that his works would have become that popular. He was painting by necessity. The thing you have to understand is that when he came into Amsterdam with his wife Saskia, they were basically, he was a portrait artist. He was licensed, contracted I should say, by particular people of wealth who would say, paint me, or paint my nieces, or my nephews, or my grandchildren. And so that's what he did for a living. He was so good at it that people began to pay him for what was known as historical narratives. Those were very popular. People loved to have a historical narrative that would be seen by their guests and so forth at their parties. And oftentimes they would have asked for something that would have been relative to their time or their favorite book, which was the Bible. So he did a lot of biblical paintings in his day and time. You can see here he's much older, he's tired, he's been through a lot, he's suffered a lot. He has not been the best person when it comes to economics. He and his wife lived in a very high-end district in Amsterdam. To offset that, he had to do a massive amount of portraits and sell those. He had to take in a lot of apprentices. And the reason why they had to, in the 1960s, go around and gather up all of his works is because nobody really knew for sure how many he exactly had. And many even said, we don't know if his works were of his own hand or that of his apprentice. Again, we're reminded that he had nearly 300 oil paintings, 300 etchings in wood and metal, and over 2,500 sketches combined. So a pursuit of what is an authentic Rembrandt took place after the 1960s. He outlived his wife, his second wife, and all of his children, and died perhaps very sad because of that. So let's just hold that, if we will, when we start to look at the paintings in the series. In the series, I want you to think about his style and approach to painting. The face meant a great deal to him, and oftentimes the nose would have been the central axis in his paintings, where the light would have been pronounced at the very beginning, and that's where much was shaped. You will also notice that he uses a technique that is very strong. It's a Baroque, a very masculine approach. He takes in many characterizations of men and femininity. He looks at breast and voluptuous curves and such, and he explores a technique known as chiaroscuro. Chiaroscuro is a means of bringing light upon something and bringing it out of darkness. And often, if you found a Rembrandt, you would see a monogram of an R, an RH, or an RHL, which would have stand for Rembrandt, son of Harmen, Leiden, which was his hometown. So this gives you a little bit about his background. We're going to see some biblical illustrations on things like David and Goliath, the sacrifice of Isaac. You're going to see some out of the Apocrypha, the historical accounts between the Old and New Testament, such as Tobit. And then, of course, in the New Testament, you see a lot of the Holy Family, the flight out of Jerusalem, out of Egypt. You see the crucifixion, a lot about him raising from Lazarus from the dead, or Judas betraying him. He is enamored with scarabs and swords, and he also every now and then get a jab of humor in some of his accounts, and I will point those out to you when we get to those particular paintings as well. So I want you to enjoy the series, and I'm going to engage you that at the end of every video there's going to be two questions. One is kind of right out of the text that I read from the biblical account, and the second one is just kind of a speculative account of your thoughts and your opinions. So enjoy. This is Rembrandt, Light and Creation.
We praise thee.